Well, welcome back, everybody. We might get some more folks trickling in here. We are back for the 36th meeting of the National Tribal Resilience Data Work Group. The things we have looked at and talked about over these years. So I'll just say a quick hello. I'm Angie Hacker. I'm the lead consultant with the Tribal Climate Health Project, here with a couple members of my team. From Prosper Sustainably, Lori Montserrat and Serena Vega. I'll pass off to Lori in just a moment here. And also here with Shasta Gone. Do you want to say hello, Shasta, from the Paul Environmental Department?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Good to see everyone.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what we'll aim to do today. We do have a great speaker lined up to talk to us. But just as a reminder, we meet every couple of months, and our goal is to try to connect national health and climate data experts and invite you to exchange knowledge on priority tribal adaptation and resilience data needs, share tools, practices, ideas, and lessons learned from the field, and explore opportunities to develop and scale up solutions to address tribal resilience data needs. So this is our agenda for the day. If you are, we would love for everyone who's here to go ahead and introduce yourself over chat, just your name, org, and location. And then if there are new folks that have never been to one of these before, we would love to get you to say hello out loud just so we can get to know you. Let's see, is there anybody brand new here today? That's not, yeah, okay. Why don't you say a quick hello? I think you might be here also to speak, but just a quick hello and just introduce you and your role. So
Hello, my name
Mary,
is Lee. I am an intern with the Climate and Wildfire Institute, and I recently graduated from UC Davis studying sustainable agriculture and food systems and Native American studies. And yeah, really excited to be here.
nice to have you.
And Angie, you want me to introduce myself now, or do you want to? Should we hang tight? All right,
Why
I'll
don't
do
you
a
do
quick one right now.
hello? Mhm.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is James Peurini. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Affairs at the Climate and Wildfire Institute. Uh, Haley's not going to be presenting today. It's her second week, so she's here to hang tight and learn and make some friends and see where this goes. But I'll be sharing a nice presentation on some work that students at UCLA did and how we're thinking about some of the data products that came out of it and what's good, what's challenging, how to use it, that sort of thing.
Thanks, James. And I suppose that's a nice thing to do to your new person. Well, yeah, so that's our main meet of the day, you guys. So that's what hang around for that conversation. We're excited to hear more about it. And James and the CWI folks have been great partners for us in some of the wildfire working group work that we were doing around data development. So who else? Mary, I think you also might be new. Did you raise your hand? Oh, you unmuted, but we cannot hear you. Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good, cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Mary Lindeblad Fry. I am with the Department of Housing and Community Development. So a lot of this work that you all do is very new to me. And I have been invited to these meetings by Lori and haven't been able to attend many. So really excited to be here and just listen and learn about what you do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Is there anybody else I missed that's new? I think we've got a lot of oldies but goodies here today. Okay. Well, so the plan will be to do what we normally do, which is just open up with sort of a space to share announcements and updates. We like having this hive brain together to help us understand what's happening in your neck of the woods. It could be just, tell us something that's relevant to tribal work, climate adaptation, and data access. Is there something we should know of? Is there something you're working on? Is there an opportunity we should be tracking? Help each other out, stay kind of in the loop and up to date. I have got a couple, but I want to leave some open space here. And when you do, if just go ahead and introduce yourself out loud so we all know who's who. And thanks to those putting their introductions in the chat. Super helpful just to remind ourselves who's who and who's here. Does anybody have any announcements? Shasta, do you want to announce the date of our Tribal Climate Health Project Summit?
Sure. When is it?
November 4th.
Yes, November 4th. I always want to say November 5th for some reason, because I think that's when we originally were going to do it. And then we had to, for space reasons, availability, we had to switch to the 4th. So yeah, Serena put the link in the chat for folks who are interested in attending. It's a 1-day summit. Sometimes we do a day and a half. This time we're doing 1 day on how to review and update your existing vulnerability assessment and or adaptation plan for tribes. So yeah, if you're interested, click that link, and we'd love to see you, or we may even tap you to be an expert for us. We're always looking for folks to speak and present.
Thanks, Shasta. It's been 10 years and you're still fun to just shoot something at and you always knock it out of the park. Ben, nice to see you.
Hey, nice to see you all as well. So I'm Ben Hatchett. I'm based in California, but work with Colorado State and Cooperative Institute for Research in the Atmosphere and the NOAA Fire Weather Test Bed. And our update is work that Emily Wells and I have been doing in partnership with Tribal Climate and Health Program. The paper that we put together based on the 10 interviews with tribal advisors across the state got revised and resubmitted. And now in the chat, I will share the revised version of that. So it's all available for you to read. And there's a bunch of neat findings and recommendations for things that people would like to see data-wise for adaptation activities. Thank you.
So it's a huge hooray. And thanks for all that work. We're excited to help distribute that information. Thanks, Ben. Annika, good to see you.
Hi, my name's Annika Alexander Ozinskis, for those I haven't met. I'm an environmental scientist at OEHA, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, and we had released our CalEnviro Screen version 5.0. It has some minor changes and updates that would affect tribes. Some tribes have updated their boundaries, and we have also, Cal EPA has released the DAC designations update as well. So I'm just going to pop that link in the chat, and I'm not part of that work, so I might not be able to answer questions about it, but wanted to throw it out there.
Thank you. Is there anything you want to just kind of briefly update for us in terms of any impact on tribal boundary, tribal information? Is it all pretty much the same? Just federally recognized tribes still have DAC designation?
So there's been updates on certain tribal boundaries. Tribes who reached out to us and worked with us to get the boundaries updated, correct via federal recognized tribes remaining as DACs. And there's been a lot of conversation about updating and including more tribal lands and unrecognized tribes in different ways. Unfortunately, I don't have an update about that, other than to say that if folks want to weigh in on that conversation, please contact me and I can get you in touch with the right people.
Okay, that's good to know. So if we know folks that are for some reason not satisfied with the current boundary in the system, they potentially could work with you. Okay, we can talk offline. All right, but thanks for that update. Donna, nice to see you.
Yeah, hello everybody. I was just going to get kind of piggyback on Annika's comment about tribal lands, and I'm working directly with the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Pacific Region Geospatial Coordinator, Ronald Lodgepole, and he's got a pretty good update on tribal lands GIS data set. So that's available. So I'll try to locate the link for that. Also, I'm working with him and also the Ipe Nation of Santa Isabel. We are reaching out to the Southern tribes of California to see if they would like to have intro level GIS ISRI training. ISRI is a kind of standard product out there. It's been out there a while, and we did a survey, and already we got 29 responses of out of I think 16 tribes in the Southern California area. So that's pretty good. And it's I guess free. And it's going to be a 2-day training, but we just met about an hour ago, and we talked about having a virtual webinar for 4 hours to kind of do an overview of intro to GIS and some of the introduction to the products of ISRI, but also Bureau of Indian Affairs has a pretty good ISRI training work plan. And so we're getting geared up for a virtual webinar sometime in, I believe, September. And the in-person workshop is going to be held in October. And we're working with, I think, San Diego State University, perhaps using their learning labs for 2 days. So, yeah. So if anybody's interested, you can email me. I put my contact in there. I can send you the link for the survey registration, or actually it's a survey that kind of says, are you interested in this training? So yeah. And then this morning I met with the governor's office on land use and climate innovation, and we are wrapping up our 5th assessment on climate change. And it's pretty much about, yeah, I'd say 90% done. They're just working on some citations, a little bit of the format, getting some artwork put in. But I think the public rollout is going to be sometime October the 19th through the 22nd. And I think there's going to be some pretty good conferencing going on in Sacramento. And it's also going to be supported by the Indigenous Future Society. It's going to help out with this rollout. So yeah, stay tuned. And yeah, there's a couple other conferences out there that I've been invited to speak at, and I don't want to really push that too much. But anyway, yeah, nice to see everybody online, and thanks.
Thanks, Donna. I think you put the right link in the chat for us for your events. Whenever you have things, we're happy to help distribute that to our network. I think there are folks out there that would be very appreciative of the support on GIS and other data efforts. So, and actually, maybe we want to talk to you because we've got our summit coming up, and we've been thinking and talking with LCI as well about how we can help share the information from the 5th climate assessment for folks that are working on vulnerability assessments.
Yeah, they're working on, LCI is working on a marketing plan, like a brochure about the 5th assessment of climate change report. So that should be coming out probably within the next few weeks. Also, I forgot to tell you, I'm rebranding my nonprofit. Had to change the name. I guess Tribal GIS is a national organization, and so they would like for me to change the name. So I am doing that. So my the new organization name is California Native American GIS, and I think I provided the new website there. So if you go to my old website, it's not functioning. But the new one's up. I'm going to be adding in more data, more information. So yeah, and we are planning to do the summit for the tribes for GIS in April next year. So yeah, so we got potentially Northern California right now. We're targeting that particular area for the conference or the summit.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands. I see Ben threw another resource for us in the chat. And I wondered if I could, since I'm into hot potatoing today, hand it over to Serena or Lori, who I think that we would be remiss to not share the good news about our tool that has now gone live since we last met. So do you want to just give a brief update, maybe throw something in the chat? We've got our new tool that we've been working on with Public Health Alliance, and it's live, which is exciting, and we have technical assistance.
We have an easy for extreme heat tool that's available now and live. Serena just dropped the link to it in the chat, and it allows tribes, or anyone actually, it was designed for tribes, but it works for anyone, to see the impacts of extreme heat over time. And it also will churn out a custom report at the end that you can edit and make your own.
It's exciting. And also, Lori and I are providing free technical assistance for tribes who are interested in using the tool. So if you know someone who knows someone who needs technical assistance on this, nobody has signed up, by the way, please sign up for technical assistance with us.
So we're just in spread the good word mode. If you can help us share this information with others, we'd certainly appreciate it. We are trying to do our best, right, on this. If data access is our jam, this was a really crowning achievement for us, thanks to Shasta, Paula, who got the grant, and thanks to California Energy Commission through the Tribal Research Grant to help us pay for it. And Colleen here on the phone did so much of the work along with the other folks of the team at Public Health Alliance. So all good news. All right, any last words on announcement before we go into our main discussion? All right, well, thanks all. It's good to keep up to date. I'm going to hand over to Lori, who has organized our speaker for the day.
Thanks. I wouldn't want to take all the credit because Serena did a lot of the work here, but I'd like to introduce James Peurini, who's been a member of our Wildfire and Water Working Group, and just an amazing person to work with. He has done a lot of work with wildfire and is going to tell us about the work that the California Wildfire Institute has done with UCLA. And I'll let him get into it rather than speak to anything incorrectly. James.
Sure. Thanks, Lori. I appreciate that. So, hi everyone. My name's James. I apologize. I'm coming to you here from my personal hell on earth, LAX airport. Uh, and apologize if there's any background noise and other mess. But so apologies for that. But and please let me know how I can be helpful throughout all of this to dull down any background noise or things like that. Awesome. Thank you, Serena. So again, I'm the Deputy Director of Public Affairs at the Climate and Wildfire Institute. Just by way of background, which has implications for some of this work. My career started as a forester and a wildland firefighter. I spent 5 years working for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde in coastal Oregon, which is where I'm from. After 5 years doing timber work and hazardous fuels reductions and prescribed fire treatments, that sort of thing, I ended up in DC. I spent 4.5 years working for a US Senator and a member of Congress over on the House side. Worked on natural resources, tribal affairs issues, things like that. After that, I spent about 6 years at the Nature Conservancy, and a lot of my work was trying to get money out of the Nature Conservancy, a big giant $2 billion nonprofit, into small community-based organizations. So working specifically with groups like the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network, led by Don Hankins, who's a cultural fire practitioner you may have come across in your work in California, and some others. Again, I'm here with Haywee Fredericks, who's a intern through the ITEP program at Northern Arizona University, but I believe comes by way of Davis, where she recently graduated. She's going to be keeping her kind of eyes and ears to the ground because her work over this summer is trying to think through ways to tell stories about tribal fire practices from her vantage point and from various different perspectives. And so a lot of that work will be narrative storytelling and work around the translation of cultural practice and science into various actions on the ground. And so she may just follow up with some folks after this if there's appetite there. Anyways, let's get right into it. Over the summer, we worked with Pablo Said and a group of students at UCLA. These are our lovely students, bright eyes, bushy tails, all very sharp. They've done a spectacular job. We loved working with this group. You can go over to the next slide. And again, with Dr. Pablo Said as a faculty advisor to this really energized group of students that were exploring a central question. And that central question was based on a policy question that CWI had. So CWI is the fiscal sponsor of a group called the Stewardship Project. And the Stewardship Project is a group of tribal fire practitioners, academics, and legal counsel coming together to think about the regulatory pathways for beneficial fire, particularly cultural burning in Indian country and on federal lands. So what does cultural fire include? It is intentional fire, prescribed fire, with a cultural component involving traditional ecological knowledge and typically for the generation of resources and products that also have cultural benefits, reeds and berries, nuts, fruits, and various other cultural and natural resources. So how can we, as the Climate and Wildfire Institute, a non-native led organization, help to think about unpacking and deregulating and cutting red tape for tribal sovereign rights, both federally recognized tribes and tribal organizations. We can move to the next slide. So some of the significance of our project. And again, I know this group thinks about smoke impacts from catastrophic fire. Our work focused primarily on the benefits of prescribed and cultural fire. However, some of the modeling that was done by these students, I think is really, really good, interesting fodder for this group to think about, because there was a lot of sort of back of the envelope, playing with assumptions, kind of shooting from the hip type of work with GIS that I think could be really, really helpful and useful for smoke dispersion and modeling and thinking about the use of sort of citizen science tools like purple air sensors. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So first, as most of you likely know, fuel accumulation is a huge problem. 110 years ago, the federal agencies decided to put out all fires and suppress the option to do beneficial fire on the ground. And that led to massive fuel accumulation. We're the Climate and Wildfire Institute, so I can't leave off without saying that climate change has obviously had an enormous impact on the pace and scale of fire. Wildfires release these large amounts of PM 2.5. You all know about that. You probably tell me more than I know. And exposure into the wildland-urban interface, and particularly WUIs, including vulnerable peoples. I think in particular of my work working for tribes in the past, elders, people with sort of public health concerns around asthma, things like that. Obviously, those impacts exacerbate in some of those more vulnerable communities and subpopulations within tribes. So you can keep it moving. So again, this group was looking at a specific policy question. So for a little bit of background, the Clean Air Act is obviously the bedrock of pollution dispersion and control in the United States, to put checks and balances on the activities of industries. It also regulates activities like fire. So under the Clean Air Act, there are national ambient air quality standards, and within those national ambient air quality standards, states are required to develop a state implementation plan, or in the case of federally recognized tribes, tribal implementation plans. Basically, you need to inventory your expected emissions and stay below certain established caps and baselines. Otherwise, you're subject to death. So in this case, there is this funny, perverse disincentive where catastrophic wildfire is included as an exemption to state implementation plans because it's uncontrollable, it's difficult to predict. However, the solution to reducing risk of catastrophic fire, beneficial fire, prescribed fire, cultural fire practices, etc., does still count in your state implementation plans. So what you have is You get away with catastrophic fire, emissions run amok, and with beneficial fire, prescribed fire applications, you're capped under these rules. So what we set out to do is put some evidence behind that. So what would the overall emissions look like between a beneficial application of fire, prescribed fire, versus catastrophic fire in a handful of modeled scenarios to demonstrate how much emissions you could reduce by thinking proactively about beneficial fire and putting it on the ground. By demonstrating some science behind this, you can then go to policymakers and create vehicles, exceptions, and strategies for enabling folks like tribal fire practitioners to do their work more readily, not only on trust lands, I would say, but on federal lands where tribes could have a much more significant role in management and in activities on the ground where they're currently not where there's currently not authorities to do so. So I'll stop there and we can move on to the next. Yeah, we didn't look at of course, and according to the climate assessment that's been mentioned, I think Donna mentioned the fifth climate assessment. Wildfire managed for resource benefit is included in that definition of beneficial fire, right? So it's cultural fire, prescribed fire, wildfire managed for resource benefit. We all make similar, very broad assumptions about smoke and dispersion when it comes to wildfire managed for resource benefit, the goal being lower severity in those cases in most events, not always, but in most events. So we're lumping together these three types of work. Again, we're going to get into a lot of assumptions that these students had to make, which is part of the fun here when it comes to making management decisions. So research questions, what gaps exist in the research environment for prescribed fire? What gaps exist in modeling of smoke and dispersion? Two, what sort of political or societal obstacles are limiting Indigenous communities' in particular ability to practice cultural fire stewardship? And three, what would it look like to change this dynamic across the state of California? So let's get into some data here. So again, we're looking at different modeled dispersions between prescribed fire and wildfire severity. We can go to the next one. Let's look at some numbers. So we looked at 3 sites. Some of these are historic fires. They're all historic fires, and we compared those against various different models. So this was really interesting because the students were able to take a look at 2 things: the actual smoke and dispersion of real fires, and the smoke and dispersion of modeled fires, including their concentration. This way, we had a real life scenario to compare contrast against, and the ability to see how accurate things like local purple air sensors were in reading various dispersion characteristics compared to what actually happened. This is probably the most fascinating thing to me under the hood of all of this work is how those comparisons took place. And I'm kind of spoiler, we were actually very close. So we can keep it going. So again, we used 3 tools for doing this. One, we mapped things out using ArcGIS. These are burn perimeters and expected burn perimeters. We translated those into a modeling software called Blue Sky, which looks at various input and makes a lot of assumptions about the consumption of fuels and numbers for smoke and modeled dispersion. You can plunk in a bunch of data around your burn perimeters and around assumptions about some of these behaviors, and it'll spit out information on PM 2.5 that really does think through interesting ways of doing this. Third, we looked at purple air observations as sort of citizen science in a deeper way, knowing that there's not a million zillion sensors out there that are doing this at high quality. I will just note on that a senator from Nevada just released a bill that would invest significantly in higher quality smoke sensors, particularly around Western states. That might be something for this group to think about, maybe even endorse, because it would be really good. I can follow up with that information. But in the meantime, we look at purple air observations, and then we look at high split data, which models smoke dispersion under various different scenarios. Think about what this all looks like and whether it's accurate, and then look at the actual fire to layer it all together to see if the modeled fire behavior looks like the actual fire behavior that was observed on the ground. Again, spoiler, it looked pretty good, and I'll show you a chart that demonstrates that these, at least, observations are relatively accurate.
And
Yeah.
James, did you want me to play this video for you or the
It just shows
Okay.
you can if you want to. It's
Okay.
fun.
I'll do it. I've worked with
Yeah,
these
might
guys
as
before. They're
well.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So this models the it looks at the weather patterns of the period of time that you're backtracking into, and it shows your dispersed smoke in that area. So were you to, as a tribal public health official or natural resources department person, wanting to look at the potential hotspots at some level of granularity, it's not perfect, but if you wanted to go into your community and play around with this feature, you could look at where smoke concentration could have looked like in various different scenarios. It really is useful, anecdotal, fun to play with, very imperfect because weather is unpredictable and smoke behavior is unpredictable. Is that your feeling on things, Serena, as you've looked at at
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You can go to the next one because or just click over one more. I am using these students as slides. You can go back one. Sorry. Yeah, let's take a look at these. So, long story short, we did modeled smoke behavior using these methods, and the results were pretty astonishing in a between 48 and 75% decrease in potential smoke emissions over the period of time, right? You have to think about the carbon benefits of storage where fires don't reach canopy height. Of course, this is not always going to be the case for beneficial fire because there are species of trees and systems where high severity crowning fire, that sort of nastier fire that you see in the news, actually is at a level and severity that is most beneficial to that system itself. So this isn't always the case, but in the case of these modeled areas that we looked at, the Garnet Fire being a group that the Sierra Sequoia Resource Partners and their intertribal coalition work closely in and within. This is the Tea Kettle Experimental Forest and in the Sierra. They have co-stewardship management partnerships with the local forest there. However, what happened last summer was a large prescribed fire that they had planned over 3,000 acres burned in a very high severity fire. So what you ended up having was an actual worst case that we could backtrack into for this. But what we did find is that you could have cut those emissions in half with some proactive work around fuels reduction and prescribed fire in that situation. We can move on to the next one. Here's where it gets really interesting, right? This is the prescribed fire versus wildfire again. The magnitude being significantly lower under these prescribed fire conditions. And we can go to the next slide. The important part being is that we had a chance to look at what happened in the Garnet fire, right? So the Garnet fire here, you can see is the observed blue, and you can see the modeled behavior using this combination of purple air sensors, high split smoke models to verify, and blue sky modeling, this sort of funky modeling trio that we were working with actually followed along relatively closely with the observed behavior of the fire. What does that tell us? Well, it always tells us that models are imperfect and sometimes it's garbage in, garbage out, but it also demonstrates that we can get a good look at what high severity fire could look like using some of these models and what the lower severity prescribed fire, beneficial fire, or cultural fire could have looked like under different scenarios. So again, the modeled behavior and the methods look relatively good. Again, coupling these purple air sensors, some high quality sensors with a bunch of modeled behavior and comparing it to what actually happened or what we picked up from those sensors. Again, the results of this, and I want to make sure that this is more about methods because I know that this group it's not totally in your all wheelhouse to focus specifically on cultural fire, more on impacts. But looking ahead, this gives us good fodder to think about policy change around what's called the exceptional events rule to the Clean Air Act or other vehicles to allow and enable, in particular, tribal communities to do more fire. It also makes a really good case for tribal co-stewardship and management, where tribes do have more authorities on federal land through various different vehicles to manage their own projects on federal lands, not just trust lands, but U.S. Forest Service lands and other federal land. So there's a number of different policy recommendations that we put forward with this. One is better data, of course. So supporting bills like Senator Jackie Rosen's sensors bill that's come out recently that would invest in high quality sensors is something that we have done and endorsed and look forward to continuing to support. That obviously has implications in California as well. And then looking at various different public health parameters around smoke dispersion, things that I know that you all support too. So happy to answer questions. Again, undergraduate research, so nothing that at this stage is really ready for peer review, but I think we did a lot of learning about what it looks like to do spatial modeling in a very sort of informal, less than peer reviewed, but still holds up to management decision making type of a way that I hope can be productive for this group to think about your own management decision making where you don't have great data.
Wow. Thank you so much, James. I know you were just saying it's only undergraduate research, but that's some pretty robust work they're doing.
Didn't they do a
Annie,
killer
I see you
job?
have a yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm just so
see you have a
impressed.
question, Annie.
Hi, thank you, James, for the presentation. That was really good. And so James, this is really great. I just want to add because here at California Air Resources Board, we always want to remind people about this another aspect of the prescribed fire versus wildfire that I noticed that you didn't mention, which is the capacity of the atmosphere to support dispersion. So, because prescribed fire is planned, so even though you might be emitting more emissions, or in some certain cases, or less or so, but because it's planned and it's before you ignite, you already gone through that process of determining, well, the atmosphere that day can support dispersion and reduce the smoke impact on the ground. And that is why that even if you just look at the ground, how much emissions released from fire versus wildfire versus prescribed fire, but just because that atmosphere can support dispersion much better with prescribed fire, and that has great benefit for public health. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah, and I'm doing a lot of this. I serve on a board of an organization called Grassroots Wildland Firefighters, and we actually look at very localized versions of this for firefighters that are, directly exposed to some of those impacts. And so thinking about that and how it varies across systems, we're even thinking about that down to the person, and that's tough because you're right up there.
Yeah, and over time, when we do more burns, over the course of decades, and when you have first entry burns, obviously that's going to tend to be a higher intensity, higher emissions. But when we are able to kind of go into a more plateau phase of prescribed burning in the future, then the emission will be less.
So something to keep an eye on, Annie, is there's a lot of folks up in Butte County, and I would actually point you directly to Don Hankins and the folks at the Big Chico Ecological Reserve. So there's also a tribal dynamic to this, but they're doing quite a few reentry burns in burned areas, managing for different invasives and at very low severity to kind of explore those reentries after the initial burn.
Right.
And I would be very curious to see what their smoke dispersion and different characteristics look like in those reentry burns, because I think you're right. That's the future, right? We're gonna see a lot of landscape burns in California, and then it's gonna be picking up the pieces and restoring and rebuilding so 100% agree. And I would point you to Don and the folks over at Chico to learn a little bit more about how they're thinking about that.
Thanks, Annie. And I don't know if you see the question in the chat from Teresa James. How can you use the same modeling in a denser population like LA?
I don't know. And I would point you towards a group that we're also working with. Some of you might know the incoming dean of the public health school over at UCLA. She's going to be coming in relatively soon, Dr. Carrie Nadeau. And she leads a group called the LA Public Health Study. Is that familiar to this group, that study outfit that they're doing? The LA Fire Health Study. I'm trying to plunk it into the chat here. And they have a handful of memos, and some of them speak to smoke concentrations and dispersions. I think the hard part when you add in that is it's not just smoke concentration, but the quality and characteristics of that smoke and toxics could vary widely. Again, I'm a forester speaking to a group of public health folks, so I shouldn't be speaking to public health, but my impression is that the characteristics of those modeling of all of that just changes wildly once you throw in toxic elements beyond the normal stuff we see in forests, 2.5 and particulate matter, that sort of thing.
Shasta.
Thanks for the presentation, James. Love to see this kind of work being done by undergrads, and it gives me a little bit more hope for the future. So I'm a social scientist. I'm an anthropologist by training, and so your slide with the 3 questions that were there for tribes to answer about barriers to doing cultural burning and that sort of thing. Was that something that the students also followed up on?
You know, a lot of this goes over, Shasta, to our co-leads for the stewardship project. So in many ways, we wanted to create some fodder for our folks that are working on federal policy regulation from the tribal side of things. So those are the folks that are kind of interweaved with between Don Hankins, the Karuk tribe, and the Indigenous Stewardship Network. There's kind of a fun mix of overlap over there of people that are beating the pavement on different policy questions. And so they will be taking up things like this. I can share like a really interesting anecdote, which is that right now we're headed towards August recess. There's a real crunch in Congress, and they need to pass a defense authorization. So the NDAA, which is this regular piece of legislation that they do, and turns out the U.S. can only really agree on spending for military and defense, and has a hard time getting other stuff passed. But I'll save my personal feelings for a while. The main point being that one of the NDAA this year could serve as a trailer for the Fix Our Forest Act. This is a real sort of semi-transformative, comprehensive bill that would provide a bunch of enabling factors for doing beneficial fire and other fuels treatments. It's a good thing. Doesn't fix our problems, but it's a good thing. And the members of those committees reached out to the Stewardship Project, particularly Dawn, to provide a definition of cultural burning, which has never been acknowledged in Congress speaking. So according to the federal government, cultural burning doesn't exist. And Don was able to direct the definitions of cultural burning that were established in the 5th climate assessment over to Congress, and a bipartisan group of Republicans and Democrats, nonetheless, for inclusion in FOFA. So some of this work around, justifying tribal co-stewardship and management is paying off. These little tidbits of information and science and good data are paying off in long-term relationships where Dawn is able to provide a bipartisan group definitions of cultural burning. Of course, it's attractive to them in different ways, right? On the Republican side, it's attractive. Cultural burning is attractive because it's local government, it's less control, it's sort of tenets of conservatism, right? On the Democratic side, there's totally different motives. But if you throw a bunch of good data at it, if you make good arguments on both sides, if you find windows of bipartisanship in communities that need these resources, and where tribes are really active partners with Congress and beating the pavement, I still think that you can get something done. And this is kind of an example of that. That was maybe far afield from what you suggested, but that's an applied purpose for some of this.
Which is great. I'm a politics junkie, and I also just appreciate that this photo on this slide, I'm sure the president would love to see that in California, we now rake our forests.
Yeah, see? We're doing it.
Then that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to mute myself now before anything else comes out.
I should have muted myself a while ago.
Hey, I've got a question, James, and thanks so much for being here. Your work is awesome, and we're happy to partner with you. And I'm curious about a couple of things. So you're right, the Tribal Climate Health Project, we usually look for information related to impacts.
Yeah.
And so this is really useful though. I love to look at this data for a policy lever. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how at like an individual tribe or group of tribes, maybe in California, working on this. I would get to work with many of them through the Tribal Capacity Building Program here in California that are working on prescribed burning, how they can use any of this information to make the case, even here in California, where the policies aren't always where we need them to be.
Yeah, something that I've seen here is like working with very imperfect data and data where you need to toss out bad information, right? So looking at things like these purple air sensor observations where you're going to get a bunch of funky stuff. And what I would argue is that Pablo, again, back at the envelope, maybe wouldn't hold up to peer review rigor, but using what we have, finding strategic methods for tossing anything that looks observably bad, and cross-referencing what we know about smoke behavior from real fires with theoretical modeled behavior to see, how close we are. And I think that way we can increase confidence in a process for using very imperfect data. And I find that very helpful. That's my actual biggest learning out of all of this is not, what we found in terms of actual percentages. It's that chart that shows the observed versus modeled behavior, which line up relatively well, correcting for bad observation. And again, we need to do this about 1,000 more times to feel more confident in that imperfect data and what it came up with. But I think for management purposes, there's a good reason for folks in their local communities to see if some of that information lines up, see what's bad, find good strategies for tossing it, look for reliable data, and go from there. That's kind of my like management forester need to arrive at a conclusion type learning from this. But I would defer to Pablo, and maybe that's a good follow-up for this group is following up with Pablo for more specifics on what he feels like holds up from a scientific standpoint and what his actual methods are. I could send you like a code book of what the students did, but I couldn't explain it to you right now, honestly.
Yeah, that's great. It seems to me like there's a like regulatory changes that you're trying to inspire here. It seems like investment and it's making the case for investment in prescribed burns, which I'm sure is something that tribes will really want to see more of. So it'd be nice to get that into their hands as well.
And you did ask about policies. I'll just go back to what I've been mentioning here. For our purposes, this looks a lot like exceptions within the Clean Air Act to prescribed and beneficial fire. So that's the main point is trying to look at ways so that a tribal community that's hoping to put good fire on the ground doesn't need to get the cops called on them for going back and forth from the Air Resources Board, or have a a confrontational or challenging or difficult relationship with the local federal agency, and so that you are working towards building generative relationships with your local forests where needed, even authority to do work on those forests, enabling that type of thing, and making it so that, if you're doing something that benefits the overall situation when it comes to smoke emissions, that's not counted against you in the same way as other emissions might be. So that's kind of the main point. And then the other thing would be better data. Let's get those sensors. We're really excited about the work that Senator Rosen in Nevada is doing and making those investments. And we think that's right because the purple air observations, we did have to toss a lot, and we did have to do a lot of double, triple, quadruple checking. And if we had better information, better sensors, investment, it's not a huge investment relative to some of the things that the federal government chooses to spend money on. It would make a big difference.
Can I do one more follow-up, which is just like that you have so much data here. I'm wondering, and it's a lot of it's PM 2.5 emission. Can you translate any of this to a GHG emission reduction benefit? Because then you got a whole nother world of policy opportunity.
Yeah, I think I caught most of that, Angie, is can you translate this to GHG? Our focus on this project for scoping was specifically PM 2.5. And the reason it was PM 2.5 is because that's what the exceptional events rule and prescribed fire place caps on. So it was specifically for the policy applications. I'm sure you could think about ways to model this out using GHGs. I'm really hoping that Pablo had a lot of fun doing this work and that the students enjoyed it and that they'll want to continue with some of those efforts that go beyond our very specific, policy agenda here, which was looking at exceptional events in the Clean Air Act.
Thank you so much, James. And your thought about better sensors would also address the, all smoke is not equivalent. Depends what's burning. And I know that the Air Resources Board is doing some work around that, and better data in, better data out. So thank you so much. This has been an amazing presentation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to send a copy of that bill from Senator Rosen. I appreciate, with a new appreciation for the work that the folks that are working for the tribes are doing around public health, and for those local Air Resources Board folks that are here on the call. What a mountainous task with very spotty information. So thank you for the work that you do, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And it was nice for you not to stick highway on the primary line after 2 weeks. That was a good call.
Well, and again, Huey is looking at some communication and storytelling and narratives around some of this work, in particular in tribal communities. And so I hope that if she reaches out and has curiosities to learn about some of your careers and some of your learnings and some of what you've done to translate that into some of her work over this summer, that you'll be receptive to her message.
Absolutely. And if you haven't hooked up with Ben Hatchett, he's a good one for storytelling.
I was going to suggest the same thing. If you all aren't already best friends, I think you should be. I can see him Ben's getting excited in the chat. You all should connect and wildfire data. Let me say one more thing nice to James, just to say thank you, because he's one of several people that have been participating in our wildfire working group. This is an effort of the Tribal Climate Health Project to look at the access to wildfire smoke related data and its respiratory health related data, and trying to push the envelope a little bit further so that tribes get better access to information that can help them understand and prepare for their risks. So just thanks for participating in that process, James. We really appreciate having your brain around. And that might do it for the day. So let's stop here unless there's any final comments. All right. It was a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
one. Thank you. We'll see you in 2 more months.